My name is Elena Carter. I was 32 years old the night my family locked me outside with my 6-week-old daughter in 30-degree weather, and for 11 minutes I honestly believed they were going to let us stay there. It happened at 12:14 a.m. I remember because the porch light flickered twice when the deadbolt turned, and my daughter's blanket slipped from my shoulder onto the wet concrete while my mother pretended not to hear me knocking. The strange part was not the lock, it was the silence after. No yelling, no threats, just silence. What they did not know was that 2 months earlier I had signed one document my father never bothered to read carefully, because he assumed I was too exhausted after childbirth to understand what I was signing. I did not scream that night. I walked to my car instead. And what my family discovered 3 days later destroyed everything they thought was safe. If you have ever been treated like the outsider inside your own family, this story will stay with you, because sometimes the person they underestimate owns more than the house itself. The first thing I noticed was the lasagna pan. It was still warm on the passenger seat beside me, wrapped in 2 faded kitchen towels my mother had owned since I was a teenager. The smell of tomato sauce filled the car while my daughter Ava slept in her carrier behind me, making those tiny, uneven newborn sounds that always made me check if she was breathing. The digital clock on my dashboard read 12:11 a.m. 3 minutes later, my family locked us outside. At the time, I still believed it had been impulsive, emotional, something my mother would regret by morning. I did not understand yet that they had talked about it beforehand. That was the part that kept me awake later, not the lock itself, the planning. Rain hit the windshield in soft taps while I sat in the driveway for another minute, trying to calm down before going inside. My hands hurt from gripping the steering wheel too hard during dinner. Inside the house, my father had spent 2 straight hours criticizing everything I did with Ava. Too much formula, too little formula, holding her wrong, rocking her too long. He said it casually, calmly, like observations. That was always his method. "You're too emotional lately," he told me while cutting garlic bread. New mothers make mistakes when they get emotional. My mother did not defend me. She rarely did anymore. Instead, she kept wiping the same clean counter with a damp rag while avoiding eye contact, which somehow felt worse. My younger brother Nathan mostly stared at his phone. Only once did he look up. That happened when my father asked if I had finally thought realistically about giving him temporary access to Ava's medical records in case something happened. I laughed at first because I thought he was joking. Nobody else laughed. That was 6 hours earlier. Now I sat in the driveway staring at the dark second-floor windows, trying to convince myself the tension from dinner would fade overnight. Ava stirred softly behind me. "It's okay," I whispered. I was not sure which one of us I meant. I picked up the lasagna pan and diaper bag together. The diaper bag slid down my shoulder immediately. My body still hurt from childbirth, especially my lower back, and carrying anything after midnight felt heavier than it should have. The porch light flickered once when I reached the front steps, twice when I unlocked the door. Inside, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and burnt coffee. The television glowed faintly from the living room, though the volume was muted. Someone had left a half-full mug on the side table beside my father's chair. That meant he was still awake. I suddenly wished I had stayed at my friend Dana's apartment instead. But Dana lived 40 minutes away. Ava hated long car rides, and despite everything, part of me still believed family arguments ended eventually. That belief lasted maybe 90 seconds. I had just set the lasagna pan on the kitchen counter when my father walked in wearing gray sweatpants and the same blue flannel shirt from dinner. He looked fully awake, not surprised to see me. Prepared. "You're late," he said. "It's midnight. You should not have taken the baby out that long." "I took her to Walgreens. For what?" I stared at him. "Diapers." His jaw tightened slightly. Barely noticeable unless you knew him well. My father never yelled first. He preferred disappointment, controlled pressure, silence. It made people explain themselves even when they had done nothing wrong. Ava started crying from her carrier in the entryway. I moved toward her automatically, but my father spoke again before I reached the door. "Your mother's asleep." "Okay. She needs rest." I looked back at him. So do I. For a second, something strange crossed his face, not anger exactly. Calculation. Then he folded his arms. You can't keep disrupting this house. That word stayed with me afterward. This house. Not our house, not home, this house. I unbuckled Ava carefully and lifted her against my chest. She smelled faintly like baby shampoo and formula. Her crying softened immediately. She's 6 weeks old, I said quietly. Babies wake up. That's not the issue. Then what is? My father looked toward the hallway before answering. You need stability. I almost laughed again. I have stability. No, he said calmly. You have stress. The rain outside got louder suddenly. I remember hearing water rush through the gutter beside the kitchen window. My father lowered his voice. Your mother and I think you should stay somewhere else for a few days. I honestly thought I misheard him. At midnight? You've been hostile all evening. I've been tired. You frightened your mother earlier. I blinked at him. How? You raised your voice. I said no. That's not how she remembers it. There it was. The quiet rewriting of reality. The thing my family did so smoothly it made you question your own memory. Ava shifted against my shoulder while I stared at him across the kitchen island. What exactly are you asking me? His eyes moved briefly toward the front door. Not toward me. Toward the door. That was when my stomach dropped for the first time. I think, he said slowly, everyone needs space tonight. Behind him, I heard movement in the hallway. Nathan. He was standing there now in socks and a black hoodie, avoiding my eyes completely. That scared me more than my father did, because Nathan hated conflict. If he was awake for this, then they had discussed it already. What's going on? I asked. Nobody answered immediately. My father rubbed his wedding ring once with his thumb. He always did that before difficult conversations. Then he said something I still replay in my head. You should have thought more carefully before making things difficult in a house that doesn't belong to you. The sentence landed strangely, not because it hurt, because something about it felt rehearsed and wrong. I cannot explain it better than that, just wrong. Ava began crying harder, sharp little cries, hungry cries. I walked past both of them toward the fridge to grab her bottle from earlier. My father stepped sideways, blocking the kitchen entrance, not aggressively, almost politely, but enough. You need to leave tonight, he said. I stared at him. You're serious? Yes. Where exactly am I supposed to go? You'll figure something out. Nathan finally spoke then, barely above a whisper. Dad? Stay out of it, my father said. The silence afterward felt heavy enough to touch. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far away. I looked toward the staircase, expecting my mother to appear. She never did. That hurt more than the rest. Because years later, I still wonder if she listened from upstairs while her granddaughter cried downstairs beside the front door. I picked up the diaper bag slowly. No panic yet, not outwardly. My father moved toward the entrance and opened the front door himself. Cold air rushed inside immediately. That's enough for tonight, he said. I should have fought harder then. Maybe most people would have. But exhaustion changes you. Childbirth changes you. Weeks without sleep turn arguments into fog. So I walked outside carrying my daughter. Nathan would not look at me. The porch light flickered again overhead. I turned once after reaching the driveway. My father stood inside the doorway, holding the edge of the door with one hand. Calm. Certain. Then the deadbolt turned, a metallic click. Simple sound, small sound. But I remember every detail of it. Because what I did not know yet was that my father had just locked the legal owner of the house out in the rain. And by Friday, everything would change. I sat in the driveway for 9 minutes after they locked the door, not moving, just listening. Rain tapped against the windshield while Ava cried softly in the back seat, and the upstairs bedroom light turned on exactly once before disappearing again. Someone had looked outside. Nobody came down. At 12:26 a.m., I started the engine. I remember the timestamp because the radio lit up automatically and flashed the numbers across the dashboard in pale blue light while my hands shook against the steering wheel. Not violently. Just enough to make me angry at myself. I hated crying in front of my family. They always treated emotion like evidence against you. If you stayed calm, you were cold. If you reacted, you were unstable. They controlled both outcomes. Ava quieted once the heater warmed the car. I reached back blindly and touched her socked foot until she settled again. Then I drove. Not toward Dana's apartment, toward the 24-hour grocery store on Brighton Avenue. I do not know why. Maybe because bright public places feel safer when your life suddenly stops making sense. The parking lot was almost empty, except for a delivery truck and an older man returning shopping carts in the rain. I parked beneath a broken light near the pharmacy entrance and fed Ava a bottle while condensation blurred the windows. At 12:41 a.m., my mother texted me. Not a call, a text. Your father is upset. Give him tonight to calm down. That was all. No mention of the weather, no mention of Ava, no apology. I stared at the message for a long time before locking my phone again. What I did not understand yet was that my mother only texted when she wanted proof later. Proof she had reached out. Everything in my family became documentation eventually, especially kindness. 3 months earlier, I had moved back into my parents' house after leaving Chicago. That was the official story anyway. The real story was messier. I had been 7 months pregnant, recently separated, and surviving mostly on freelance bookkeeping jobs after my ex-boyfriend Gavin disappeared halfway through the pregnancy with exactly $4,200 missing from our shared account. My parents offered help immediately. My father insisted. You need support, he said over the phone. No daughter of mine is raising a baby alone in some apartment. At the time, it sounded loving. Now I understand control often arrives disguised as rescue. The house itself sat on Hawthorne Lane in a neighborhood full of trimmed hedges and expensive quietness. My parents bought it in 1998 for $310,000, back before the area became impossible for normal people to afford. My father treated the property like a monument to himself. Nobody wore shoes upstairs. Nobody used coasters incorrectly. Nobody touched the thermostat, and absolutely nobody questioned his decisions once he retired from managing regional bank branches 5 years earlier. Especially not me. At first, moving back almost felt comforting. My mother cooked constantly after Ava was born. Soups, bread, pasta dishes nobody finished. She folded baby clothes late at night while humming under her breath the same way she had when I was little. There were moments she looked genuinely happy. That made what happened later worse somehow. Because cruelty is easier to survive when the person never loved you at all. The problem started small, comments mostly. You look tired. You forgot the pediatrician paperwork. You shouldn't hold her every time she cries. Then the comments became systems. My father started keeping a whiteboard calendar in the kitchen tracking Ava's feeding schedule. Without asking me, he bought a baby monitor that connected to his phone. Without asking me. One afternoon, I came home from a postpartum checkup and found my mother reorganizing my bedroom drawers. To make things easier, she had opened everything, even the hospital paperwork. Especially the hospital paperwork. That was the first time I considered leaving. But leaving costs money, and exhaustion makes difficult decisions feel physically impossible. 3 days passed after the grocery store night. I told people we had an argument. That sounded smaller, cleaner. Dana wanted details immediately. You're staying here longer than one night, she said while helping me carry Ava's things upstairs to her apartment. I don't know yet, Elena. I just need sleep first. Dana stopped beside the hallway mirror and looked directly at me. You have bruises under your eyes. I have a newborn. No, she said quietly. You have stress. Funny how different those same words sounded coming from someone kind. Dana's apartment smelled like vanilla candles and laundry detergent. Her upstairs neighbor played jazz trumpet badly around dinner every evening, but the place still felt calmer than my parents' house ever had. On the second morning, I woke up briefly at 5:18 a.m. and could not remember where I was. For maybe 3 seconds, I thought I was still on Hawthorne Lane. Then relief hit so suddenly it almost scared me. That should have told me everything. But families train you slowly. Even after they hurt you, part of you still searches for reasons they might be right. That Thursday afternoon, Nathan called me from outside his gym. I could hear traffic behind him. You okay? He asked. I guess. Long silence. Then Dad's serious. You not coming back? My chest tightened slightly. Did Mom say that? No. Another silence. Nathan, he thinks you need structure. I laughed once under my breath. With my own child, you know how he gets. Yes, I did. That was the problem. Nathan lowered his voice. He keeps talking about stability. Again that word, like they had practiced it together. He said something weird yesterday, Nathan added. What? He said the house situation complicated everything. I sat upright slowly on Dana's couch. What house situation? I don't know. Then why mention it? He was arguing with Mom in the kitchen. Nathan hesitated. I wasn't supposed to hear. Something cold moved through my stomach then. Not fear exactly, recognition. Like touching a loose stair and realizing it had been broken for years. What exactly did he say? I only caught part of it. Nathan, he exhaled heavily. He said, if she finds out whose name is actually attached to this place, we lose leverage. The room went completely quiet around me. Even Ava had stopped fussing in her bassinet beside the couch. What does that mean? I asked. I don't know, but he sounded nervous, too nervous. Outside Dana's apartment window, rainwater slid slowly down the glass in crooked lines, while I replayed the sentence in my head again and again. Whose name is actually attached to this place? That was a Thursday. By Saturday morning, I would open a drawer upstairs in my father's office and find something he never expected me to see. Nothing happened for 2 days. Then something did. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright after nearly a week of rain. Dana left early for work around 7:10 a.m., kissing Ava's forehead before grabbing her travel mug and disappearing down the apartment stairs. Stay here as long as you need, she whispered before leaving. The words stayed with me after the door closed. As long as you need. No conditions attached. I spent most of that morning trying not to think. Laundry, bottles, tiny repetitive tasks. Ava slept against my chest while daytime television murmured quietly in the background. But my mind kept circling Nathan's sentence. If she finds out whose name is actually attached to this place, we lose leverage. Leverage, not love, not concern, leverage. Around 11:40 a.m., my phone buzzed again. My father. Not a text this time. A voicemail. I almost deleted it without listening. Instead, I pressed play. Elena, this situation has gone on long enough. Your mother is very upset. We need to discuss boundaries before you come back here with the baby. Call me by tonight. No apology. Not once. What struck me most was the phrase come back here, not come home, here. Like even language itself had become territorial. I replayed the voicemail twice more while Ava slept beside me in her bassinet. Then I opened my banking app for reasons I could not fully explain. Maybe instinct, maybe memory. 3 months earlier, shortly before Ava's birth, my father had helped me handle paperwork after I returned from Chicago. That was how he phrased it, paperwork. At the time, I had been swollen, exhausted, and terrified about becoming a mother alone. I signed forms without reading carefully because I trusted him. Or maybe because trusting your parents feels automatic until suddenly it does not. One memory surfaced sharply then. A Tuesday afternoon in February. My father standing beside the dining room table wearing reading glasses low on his nose, while papers covered nearly every surface. You should really consolidate your debts now, he told me calmly. Rates are changing. I don't even own anything. That's not the point. He slid another document toward me. Sign there. I remember hesitating because one page mentioned Hawthorne Lane somewhere near the bottom. That's the house, I said. It's procedural, he answered immediately. Bank restructuring language. Then my mother entered carrying tea, distracting me long enough for him to flip the page. At the time it meant nothing. Now my hands felt cold remembering it. I stood up so quickly the couch blanket slid onto the floor. By 12:15 p.m., I was driving back toward Hawthorne Lane. Not because I had a plan, because confusion eventually becomes momentum. The neighborhood looked exactly the same as always. Quiet streets, expensive mailboxes, decorative trees losing early autumn leaves across perfect lawns. Normal. That was the disturbing part. Terrible things often happen in completely ordinary places. My parents' driveway was empty except for my mother's silver Lexus. My father's truck was gone. Good. I parked 2 houses down anyway. Ava slept through the entire drive. I sat with the engine running almost 4 minutes before finally lifting her carrier from the back seat. Part of me still felt ridiculous. Like maybe I had imagined everything. Families do that to you too. They make you doubt your own pattern recognition. The front door opened before I even knocked. My mother stood there wearing jeans and one of her oversized cream sweaters, holding a damp dish towel in both hands. For 1 second, her expression softened when she saw Ava. Then it disappeared. "You shouldn't just show up," she said quietly. "I lived here. You caused a scene." I stared at her. "You locked me outside with the newborn." Her eyes shifted immediately toward the neighboring houses. Lower voice now. "Don't exaggerate." That sentence hit harder than yelling would have. Because some people can erase your reality without ever raising their voice. "I need a few things," I said finally. "You should have called. I'm calling now." She pressed her lips together tightly, then stepped aside. The house smelled like cinnamon candles and furniture polish. Somewhere upstairs, a vacuum cleaner hummed faintly. "You're cleaning?" I asked. "Your father likes the house organized." Of course he did. I carried Ava upstairs slowly while my mother followed several steps behind me like security. That irritated me immediately. "You think I'm stealing something?" "No." "Then stop following me." She stopped halfway up the staircase but did not answer. My bedroom looked untouched except for the bed being perfectly made. Too perfectly made. My mother had clearly been inside after I left. Again, the sight made my chest tighten unexpectedly. Someone had folded my clothes, rearranged my nightstand, even stacked Ava's stuffed animals by size. Nothing violent, nothing obvious. That was always their talent. Control hidden inside helpfulness. I packed quietly for several minutes. Diapers, baby blankets, formula containers. Then I saw it. A small yellow folder partly visible beneath the edge of my desk. Not mine. I crouched carefully and pulled it free one-handed while holding Ava against my shoulder. Inside were photocopies, mortgage statements. My stomach dropped immediately. Hawthorne Lane. Past due notices, different dates, different amounts. One balance showed $187,000 remaining. Another notice had final warning stamped in red across the top. And every single statement carried the same name. Mine, not my father's, mine. For several seconds, I honestly thought it had to be a mistake. Then I noticed something worse. The mailing dates. Months old. The earliest notice arrived before Ava was even born. My father had hidden them. A floorboard creaked somewhere down the hallway. I closed the folder instantly. My mother appeared in the doorway almost immediately afterward. Too quickly, like she had been watching. "What's that?" she asked. "Nothing." Her eyes locked on the yellow folder. For the first time since I arrived, she looked genuinely nervous. Not angry, nervous. "Your father handles all financial matters," she said carefully. "I didn't ask. He's trying to protect you." From what? No answer. Ava stirred against my chest while silence filled the room between us. Then my mother said something that changed the entire shape of my fear. "You need to stop looking into things you don't fully understand." Not "don't worry." Not "let us explain." Stop looking. That was when I knew the secret was real. I slipped the folder quietly into the diaper bag beneath Ava's blankets. My mother noticed. Her hands tightened around the dish towel immediately. "Elena, what? That paperwork doesn't concern you." I looked directly at her then. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the question I had been avoiding since Thursday. "Why is my name on the mortgage?" My mother opened her mouth, closed it again, then looked toward the hallway instead of at me. And that was answer enough. 3 days went by. I replayed that sentence every night. "Why is my name on the mortgage?" My mother never answered it, not directly. Instead, she followed me downstairs while I carried Ava toward the front door, speaking in that soft, careful voice people use when they are trying to calm a dangerous animal. "Your father explained everything already." "No, he didn't. You were overwhelmed back then. I signed something." "You signed several things." That word bothered me immediately. Several. Outside, wind pushed dead leaves across the driveway in dry scratching sounds, while I strapped Ava into her car seat with shaking fingers. My mother stood beside the open passenger door, gripping her sweater sleeves tightly. "You should come for dinner tomorrow," she said suddenly. I looked up at her. "Why?" "We need to discuss things as a family." Families in my house never discuss things. They announce them. Still, I said yes, partly because I wanted answers, partly because fear makes people walk toward danger hoping it will finally explain itself. Sunday dinner started at 5:30 p.m., exactly on time. My father believed lateness reflected weak character. When I arrived, 4 cars already lined the driveway. Too many for a normal dinner. The sight stopped me cold before I even turned off the engine. Inside the house, voices drifted through the front windows. More than voices, an audience. That was my first real warning. Ava slept through most of the drive from Dana's apartment. I sat in the car another minute, staring at the house while porch lights glowed softly against the darkening sky. "What are they doing?" I whispered. Ava stretched slightly inside her blanket. No answer there either. The moment I walked inside, conversation stopped. Every single person looked at me. My Aunt Denise stood beside the dining room holding a wine glass. My cousin Rachel sat near the fireplace, scrolling her phone too quickly to actually read anything. Even Nathan looked tense enough to disappear into the wall. And at the head of the dining table sat my father, waiting. I almost left immediately, I should have. But then my mother stepped forward, smiling too brightly. "There she is," she said. Like this was normal. Like families regularly ambushed each other beside casseroles and folded napkins. "What's going on?" I asked quietly. My father folded his hands together. "Sit down." "No." His expression hardened slightly. "Alina." I said no. The room stayed painfully silent. Aunt Denise looked embarrassed already. Rachel avoided eye contact completely. Nathan stared at the floor. Nobody wanted to be there. That was obvious immediately, which meant my father did. He stood slowly from the table. "I asked everyone here because the situation has become concerning." Concerning. Another rehearsed word. "You locked me outside," I said. My father ignored that completely. "You've been emotional for weeks. There it is. You're isolating the baby. She's my daughter. You've refused support. I refused control." My father sighed softly like I was exhausting him. That performance almost impressed me. Calm voice, relaxed shoulders. Concerned parent. Only the hands gave him away. His fingers kept tapping once against the table edge every few seconds. Tiny movements. Tiny cracks. My mother stepped in quickly. "Your father is only worried about stress affecting your judgment." "By kicking me out? You left voluntarily," she said immediately. The room went completely still. Even Denise looked shocked. I laughed once under my breath because the alternative was screaming. "No," I said slowly. "You locked the door. You said you needed space. I had a newborn in my arms. You were upset." Again. Always rewriting, always sanding down reality until only their version remained. My father reached into a folder beside his chair and removed several papers. Immediately my stomach tightened. Paperwork again. Everything important in my family eventually became paperwork. "We'd spoken with someone," he said calmly, "about stability options." "What does that mean?" "You need temporary support." "Stop saying support when you mean control." "Alina," my mother interrupted softly. "Nobody is trying to take Ava from you. Take. Not help, not protect. Take." The word hung in the air long after she stopped speaking. My Aunt Denise finally set down her wine glass. "Frank," she said carefully, "maybe this conversation should happen privately." "No," my father answered immediately. "Witnesses are important." That sentence chilled me instantly. Witnesses. Not family. Witnesses. My father slid one paper across the table toward me. I did not touch it immediately. The top line read, "Temporary guardianship consultation." For a moment the room actually tilted slightly. Not dramatically. Just enough to make me grip the back of a chair. "This is insane," I whispered. "It's precautionary. You went to a lawyer? You've been unstable. I'm exhausted. You've become unpredictable. I'm sleep deprived. You're proving my point." That was the trap. Defend yourself emotionally and you become emotional. Stay calm and they call you detached. I looked around the room desperately then, at Denise, at Nathan, at anyone. Nathan finally spoke. "She's a good mom." Silence. My father turned slowly toward him. "Nobody said otherwise." "You implied it. Watch your tone." Nathan looked down immediately. There it was again. Control moving through the room like weather. My mother reached toward Ava then. "Let me hold her while we talk." I stepped backward automatically. No, That movement changed everything. The room shifted instantly after that single step. My father's jaw tightened. Rachel finally looked up from her phone. Even Denise frowned slightly, because suddenly I looked defensive. And maybe I was. But instincts exist for reasons. No, I said quietly. My mother froze. You don't trust me now. The hurt in her voice sounded real. That was the worst part. I think some part of her genuinely believed herself. Families like mine blur reality so often they eventually confuse manipulation with love. My father straightened the stack of papers carefully. Then he said the sentence that finally connected everything together. You need to understand your position here before this gets uglier. Position, not role, not relationship. Position. I thought suddenly about the yellow mortgage statements hidden beneath Ava's diapers back at Dana's apartment. Past due. My name. Leverage. And then another realization arrived quietly behind the first. This meeting was not about my parenting. It was about the house. I just did not know how yet. Ava stirred softly against my shoulder. My father noticed immediately. She needs consistency, he said. She needs sleep. She needs adults making rational decisions. I stared at him for a very long time then. Finally, I asked the question nobody else in the room understood yet. Why was my name on the mortgage statements? Everything stopped. Completely. Nathan looked up sharply. Rachel blinked. Even Aunt Denise frowned in confusion. But my parents? They looked terrified, only for a second, but long enough. And what I did not know yet was that the documents in my diaper bag were only half the story. The real secret was still upstairs. Nobody answered my question, not immediately. The silence stretched long enough for the grandfather clock near the staircase to chime 6 times while every person in the room avoided looking directly at me. Then my father smiled. Small smile. Careful smile. The kind adults use when children misunderstand something simple. You found old paperwork, he said calmly. Why is my name on it? It was temporary. That's not an answer. It was procedural. Same word as before, procedural. I felt suddenly certain he had rehearsed this exact conversation somewhere beforehand. Maybe with my mother. Maybe alone in his office upstairs while deciding how much truth I could handle without becoming dangerous. My Aunt Denise looked between us slowly. What paperwork? She asked. My father answered too quickly. Nothing important. That confirmed it immediately, because people hiding nothing do not rush to minimize it. I shifted Ava higher against my shoulder while trying to stay calm. My heartbeat felt strangely loud inside my ears. What exactly did I sign? You were helping the family. With what? My father's fingers tapped the table once, twice, then stopped. The market changed after retirement, he said carefully. Rates became difficult. My mother stepped closer suddenly. We didn't want to burden you. There it was again. Not denial, redirection. That scared me more. What burden? Another silence. Finally, Denise spoke again. Frank, if her name is attached financially, she deserves an explanation. My father looked irritated immediately. Family matters should stay inside the family. Denise crossed her arms. We are family. That landed harder than she intended. For one brief moment, I saw genuine anger flash across my father's face before disappearing again beneath calmness. That was clue number 1. The second came 30 minutes later. Dinner happened anyway. Unbelievably. My mother served chicken parmesan while tension thickened the air so heavily nobody could taste anything. Rachel left early claiming a migraine. Nathan barely touched his food. Only my father seemed comfortable, too comfortable, like someone following a script already written. Halfway through dinner, Ava started crying, sharp, exhausted cries. I stood automatically. I'll feed her upstairs. No, see, my father said immediately. Every head turned toward him. Too fast, too firm. My mother recovered first. Your old room is cold, she explained quickly. Stay down here. But something about my father's reaction bothered me instantly. Not concern, fear. I looked toward the staircase, then back at him. What's upstairs? His expression flattened completely. Excuse me? The office. Silence again. Tiny cracks everywhere now. My father folded his napkin carefully beside his plate. You've become suspicious of everyone lately. Answer the question. There is no question. But his hands were shaking slightly. I did not ask why, not then. Instead, I carried Ava upstairs anyway. Nobody physically stopped me. That almost made it worse, because silence can feel more threatening than yelling. The hallway smelled faintly like dust and lemon polish. Family photographs lined the walls exactly where they had hung my entire life. Christmas mornings, graduations, vacations, proof of happiness carefully framed. My father's office sat at the end of the hall behind a dark wooden door usually kept closed. Growing up, entering without permission felt almost illegal. Tonight the door stood slightly open. That alone felt wrong. I pushed it wider with one hand while balancing Ava carefully against my chest. The room looked untouched since childhood. Brown leather chair, filing cabinets, bank awards hanging beside framed certificates. Even the air smelled the same. Coffee and paper. Control had a scent in that house. Ava quieted once I sat beside the desk. For several minutes I honestly planned to leave, feed the baby, go home, forget everything. Because part of adulthood is realizing some truths permanently damage your ability to love people the same way afterward. I almost chose silence. Then I noticed the file cabinet drawer, unlocked. Barely open, inside sat dozens of folders arranged alphabetically. Insurance, tax returns, retirement accounts, and one labeled, Elena, medical. My stomach tightened immediately. I should have closed the drawer. Instead, I opened the folder. Inside were copies of hospital paperwork from Ava's birth, discharge records, insurance forms, medication schedules. Then one document stopped me completely. Authorization for temporary medical access. My father's name appeared beneath mine. Signed, dated 3 days after delivery. I stared at it for several seconds before the truth slammed into me all at once. The dinner conversation, the guardianship consultation, the constant questions about Ava's doctors. They had been preparing legally. My hands started shaking hard enough to wrinkle the papers. Ava stirred against my chest immediately. "It's okay," I whispered automatically. But nothing felt okay anymore. I kept reading, another form, then another. One included notes from a social worker mentioning maternal exhaustion and recommended family support system. I suddenly remembered my mother insisting she speak privately with the hospital nurse while I showered after labor. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now every memory rearranged itself. Had they been documenting me from the beginning, building something quietly? The thought made me physically cold. Footsteps sounded downstairs, voices, laughter too loud to be natural. My family was pretending everything remained normal while I sat upstairs, realizing they may have planned around my exhaustion before I even brought Ava home. Then I saw the final page. A typed note clipped beneath the medical forms. Postpartum monitoring recommended due to emotional instability concerns raised by family. Raised by family, not doctors, family. I sat frozen for a long time staring at that sentence. This was it, the betrayal, the secret. It felt enormous enough already. For 3 days I thought I finally understood what had happened. I was wrong about one thing, the most important thing. Because while I sat upstairs, focused on the medical paperwork, another folder remained hidden beneath the desk's drawer lining, only inches away from my hand. And inside that hidden folder was the real reason my family feared losing the house. On the outside, nothing had changed. On the inside, I had already made my decision. I left dinner 20 minutes later without confronting anyone about the medical documents. That surprised even me. But rage is dangerous when the other side is collecting evidence about your emotional stability. So I stayed calm, terrifyingly calm. My father walked me to the front door carrying the same expression funeral directors wear around grieving families. Controlled sympathy, manufactured patience. "We all want what's best for Ava," he said quietly. Rainwater dripped from the porch roof behind him in steady clicks. "You used hospital paperwork against me." His face did not move. "You're misunderstanding things. You had access forms ready 3 days after I gave birth. That was precautionary." There's that word again. "Alina." "No," I interrupted softly. "You don't get to say my name like you're helping me." For the first time all evening, something ugly slipped through his expression. Just briefly. Cold irritation. Then it disappeared. "You're exhausted," he said. "That affects perception." Gaslighting works best when spoken gently. I looked past him into the hallway where my mother stood pretending not to listen. Then I said something I had not planned beforehand. I know about the mortgage statements. My father went still, completely still. No blinking, no movement, nothing. That silence told me more than any confession could have. Behind him, my mother gripped the staircase railing so tightly her knuckles turned white. Finally, my father smiled again. Small smile. Controlled. You should be very careful before making accusations about subjects you don't understand. It's not mistakes, not misunderstandings. Subjects, I nodded once. Then I left. That was Sunday night. By Tuesday morning, I was sitting inside a coffee shop on Westbrook Avenue, listening to a bank employee explain why my father had looked terrified. The call started accidentally. At least I think it did. Monday passed mostly in silence. No texts from my parents, no calls. Nathan sent one message around noon asking if I was okay, but even that sounded cautious somehow, like he expected someone else might read it. I spent most of the day reviewing the yellow mortgage statements again and again while Ava slept beside me at Dana's apartment. The amounts terrified me. Late fees, default warnings, final notices. How had I never known, and why would my father attach my name to debt without explaining it fully? By Monday night, curiosity outweighed fear. Tuesday at 9:12 a.m., I called the number listed on the latest statement. The woman who answered sounded bored at first. Mortgage Servicing Department. This is Karen. I almost hung up immediately. Instead, I gave the account number from the paperwork. Keyboard clicking followed, then silence. Longer silence. Mom, Karen said carefully, can you verify the property address? Hawthorne Lane. More typing. And your name? Alina Carter. Another pause. Then her tone changed completely. Professional now. Alert. One moment, please. My stomach tightened instantly. The hold music lasted exactly 4 minutes. I remember because Ava started crying halfway through, and I paced beside Dana's kitchen counter, bouncing her gently while staring at the microwave clock. Finally, a man picked up. Ms. Carter? My name is Marcus Hale from Residential Servicing. His voice sounded calm. Experienced. Too experienced. You requested information regarding the Hawthorne Lane property. Yes. What specifically would you like clarified? I hesitated, then decided honesty mattered less than information. My parents own the house, I said carefully, but my name appears on several statements. Complete silence, not confusion. Silence, then. Carter. How much were you told about the refinancing transfer? The world seemed to narrow suddenly around that sentence. Transfer? Another pause. Would you prefer to discuss this in person? No, I said immediately. Tell me now. Marcus exhaled softly through the phone. Your name is currently listed as primary mortgage holder on the property. My knees almost gave out. I sat down hard on Dana's couch before I dropped Ava. That's impossible. It finalized in February. The paperwork, the dining room table. My father flipping pages too quickly. What finalized? I whispered. The ownership restructuring after delinquency review. I could barely breathe properly suddenly. Delinquency. The previous account entered extended default approximately 14 months ago. Previous account, not current. My father had defaulted, badly enough to lose control of the mortgage. And somehow my name replaced his. Why would that happen? I asked. Marcus hesitated carefully. I can explain the general structure, but due to privacy limitations, some details require in-person verification. Please? Another pause. Then he lowered his voice slightly. The property was at risk of foreclosure. Based on the restructuring documents, a co-signing transfer was completed using your financial profile. I laughed once in disbelief. My financial profile? I barely had savings. Yes, Marcus answered carefully. But your credit score and debt ratio qualified differently than the original account holder after retirement status changes. I closed my eyes. My father used me. Not temporarily, legally. What exactly do I own? I asked. Silence again. Then the sentence that changed everything. As of February 17th, you became sole responsible mortgage holder for the Hawthorne Lane property. Sole, not shared. Sole. Ava made a tiny sleepy sound against my shoulder while the room tilted around me. No, I whispered. That can't be right. It is. My father said I can only speak to the legal documents filed. Real, not emotional manipulation, not misunderstandings. Documents. The kind my father respected most. I stood slowly and walked toward Dana's apartment window while rain streaked the glass outside. Suddenly, dozens of moments rearranged themselves perfectly. My father obsessing over stability, the guardianship conversation, the threats, the leverage comment Nathan overheard. They were afraid, not of losing Ava, of losing the house. And what I did not know yet was that my father had hidden one final document proving he never intended for me to discover the transfer at all. Nothing happened for 2 weeks. Then something did. My parents stopped calling entirely after the bank conversation. No texts from my mother, no carefully worded voicemails from my father. Silence again. But this silence felt different. Not punishment. Preparation. I spent those 2 weeks collecting documents quietly, methodically. That part surprised me most afterward. How calm I became once confusion finally turned into certainty. Marcus Hale agreed to meet me Thursday afternoon at a regional bank office downtown. The building smelled like printer toner and burnt coffee, exactly like every bank lobby in America. Ava slept through most of the appointment in her stroller, while Marcus reviewed copies of the restructuring paperwork across a polished conference table. He looked uncomfortable the entire time, not because of me, because he understood what he was showing me. Your father was informed multiple times about foreclosure progression, he explained carefully. Based on these notes, he pursued family restructuring rather than surrender. Family restructuring, such clean language for betrayal. Marcus slid another document toward me. Transfer of Decaimer Legidi. My signature appeared at the bottom. Real signature, not forged. That hurt more somehow, because technically my father had not lied completely. He just never explained the truth. You signed during a consolidation review, Marcus said quietly. I remember. You initialed every page. I trusted him. Marcus nodded slowly, like he had heard versions of that sentence before. Then he hesitated. There's something else you should probably see. He opened another folder. Inside sat printed email records between my father and the mortgage department. The first few looked routine. Extension requests, payment discussions, financial hardship explanations. Then I reached the final email, dated February 11th, 6 days before the transfer finalized. I still remember every word. My daughter recently returned home after a difficult separation and pregnancy. She is emotionally overwhelmed right now and unlikely to fully review the paperwork. We need this processed quickly before she changes her mind. I stopped breathing for a second, not metaphorically, actually stopped. Marcus looked away politely while I stared at the screen, emotionally overwhelmed, unlikely to fully review. Before she changes her mind, my father knew exactly what he was doing. Every second of it. The room suddenly felt too warm. I pushed the papers away slightly because my hands would not stop shaking. He planned it, I whispered. Marcus stayed careful. I can't comment on family intent. You don't have to. Because intent sat right there in black ink. Cold, measured, deliberate, not panic, not desperation, strategy. That was the real revelation. My father had not manipulated paperwork impulsively during financial stress. He had identified the weakest moment of my life. Abandoned during pregnancy, exhausted after labor, financially unstable, and used it. The medical documents upstairs suddenly made sense too. The guardianship discussion, the emotional instability language. If I challenged him legally, he needed me to appear irrational. Everything connected perfectly now. And perfect patterns are terrifying. Marcus handed me one final sheet. Property responsibility summary. Only one name appeared under legal liability. Elena Carter, mine. I stared at it for a very long time. What happens if payments stop now? I asked quietly. Marcus folded his hands. Legally, the responsible owner determines occupancy. Occupancy. Such a sterile word for home. Outside the conference room window, traffic crawled slowly through downtown under gray November skies, while my entire childhood rearranged itself inside my head. Every lecture about responsibility, every speech about family sacrifice, every warning about financial maturity, all from a man secretly drowning in debt while attaching his daughter to the sinking structure without informed consent. And somehow the cruelest part still was not the money. It was the confidence. He truly believed I would never figure it out. That realization hurt worst of all. 3 days later, my mother called unexpectedly. Sunday morning, 8:14 a.m., I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered calmly, "Alina?" Her voice sounded exhausted. For a moment, she sounded almost like my mother again, not the careful woman rewriting conversations at dinner tables, just tired. "We should talk," she said softly. "About what?" Long silence. Then, "Your father's worried." I laughed quietly before I could stop myself. "Now he's worried. This situation has gone too far." "You mean your secret?" Another silence. "Elena, no," I interrupted gently. "You watched him do this. He was trying to save the house, with my name. We thought eventually we could fix things. We, not him. We." That word settled heavily inside my chest. Because families rarely break from one betrayal alone. They break from smaller loyalties accumulating around the betrayal until silence itself becomes participation. "I found the emails," I said. Everything went silent, completely silent. Then I heard her breathing change slightly. "Fear, finally. He didn't mean, he absolutely meant it. He loves you." There it was, the unbearable complication. Because she was right. In his own distorted way, I think my father did love me. I remembered him teaching me to ride a bike in the church parking lot when I was 8. Running beside me, breathless and laughing after I finally stayed balanced alone. I remembered him sitting beside my hospital bed after appendicitis when I was 13, refusing to leave overnight because I looked scared. Real love existed there once. That made this harder, not easier. My mother's voice cracked suddenly. "He thought he was protecting the family." "No," I said quietly. "He was protecting the house." And maybe those had become the same thing to him years earlier. By Tuesday afternoon, my father finally called himself. No voicemail, no performance, just direct. "We need to settle this privately." I stood at Dana's kitchen sink, staring out at rainwater dripping from the fire escape. "No," I answered. Silence. Then his voice changed slightly. Harder now. "You don't understand the consequences." "I do, actually. You're making emotional decisions." There it was again, always emotional. Never informed, never betrayed, never right, just emotional. I smiled without humor. "You locked the homeowner outside with a newborn," I said calmly, "in front of witnesses." For the first time in my entire life, my father had no response ready. And what happened next is not what I expected. And it is not what they expected either. Saturday arrived cold enough to frost the edges of car windows. At 1:43 p.m., I parked across from the Hawthorne Lane house, holding a folder thick enough to change my entire family permanently. Inside sat mortgage transfers, bank correspondence, default notices, printed emails, every secret my father thought would stay buried beneath politeness and confusion. Dana sat beside me in the passenger seat, holding Ava's diaper bag across her lap. "You sure?" she asked quietly. No, that was the truth. Courage is usually just exhaustion finally outweighing fear. Across the street, my parents' front curtains twitched once. They were watching already. Of course they were. Marcus Hale arrived exactly 7 minutes later, wearing a dark wool coat and carrying a leather portfolio beneath one arm. He gave me one careful nod before walking toward the driveway. 2 cars behind him came Aunt Denise. Then, unexpectedly, Nathan. My stomach tightened immediately, seeing him step out of his truck. Not because I feared him. Because he looked ashamed, and shame changes people unpredictably. "What's he doing here?" Dana whispered. "I don't know." Nathan avoided eye contact completely while walking toward the house. By 1:58 p.m., everyone stood inside the living room except Officer Ruiz, who remained near the front entrance after Marcus quietly requested a civil standby through locals' dispatch earlier that morning. That part almost made me laugh. My father spent years acting like law and paperwork protected him absolutely. Now both stood inside his living room for me instead. The house looked immaculate. Of course it did. Fresh flowers on the dining table, vacuum lines across the carpet, lemon polish smell lingering in the air, control presented as cleanliness again. My mother stood beside the fireplace, twisting her wedding ring repeatedly, while my father remained near his recliner, with both hands clasped behind his back like a retired principal preparing for discipline. Only his eyes betrayed him. He looked tired, older somehow. Marcus opened his portfolio calmly. Mr. Carter, he began, thank you for agreeing to meet. My father ignored him completely. Instead, he looked at me. You involved outsiders. I adjusted Ava carefully against my shoulder. You involved my identity in a mortgage transfer. We saved this family. No, I said quietly. I saved your house. The room went silent immediately. Denise sat slowly onto the couch like her knees suddenly weakened. Nathan stared at the floor. My mother looked close to tears already. Still nobody denied it. That mattered. Marcus removed several documents and placed them neatly across the coffee table. I'm here only to confirm legal records and occupancy authority, he explained professionally. My father laughed once under his breath. Occupancy authority. Like the phrase itself offended him. This is my home. Marcus stayed calm. Legally, the mortgage liability and controlling authority transferred February 17th. My father's jaw tightened visibly. Officer Ruiz shifted slightly near the doorway but said nothing. Outside, wind rattled dry branches against the living room windows in uneven scratching sounds. My mother finally spoke. We were trying to keep the family together. I looked at her for a long moment. You locked your daughter outside. You were screaming. No, I answered softly. Ava was crying. That sentence broke something in the room. You could feel it. Even my father looked away briefly afterward. Nathan spoke suddenly then. She wasn't unstable. Everybody turned toward him immediately. His voice shook hard enough to crack. You kept saying that. But she wasn't. My father's face darkened. Nathan, no. Nathan swallowed visibly. I heard you talking to Mom before the hospital paperwork too. My mother closed her eyes instantly. Small movement, huge meaning. What paperwork? Denise asked sharply. Nobody answered, so I did. The postpartum monitoring notes, I said calmly. The guardianship consultation. The medical access forms. Denise stared at my parents in disbelief. You documented her after childbirth? It wasn't like that, my mother whispered immediately. Then explain it. Silence again. Always silence when truth cornered them. My father straightened slightly. We were concerned. No, I interrupted quietly. You were preparing. His eyes snapped toward mine. There it was. The real conflict finally uncovered beneath months of manipulation. Not concern, not misunderstanding, preparation. You think this is betrayal? He asked coldly. I carried this family financially for 30 years. And then you defaulted. The sentence landed like broken glass. Complete silence afterward, because nobody else knew. Not Denise, not Nathan. Maybe not even my mother fully. My father's face drained slowly of color. Marcus lowered his eyes politely toward the paperwork. Denise looked genuinely stunned. You lost the house? She whispered. My father did not answer. I stepped forward then and placed the printed email onto the coffee table between us. The one about me being emotionally overwhelmed. My father saw it immediately. For the first time in my entire life, I watched him lose control publicly. Not screaming. Worse. Fear. Actual fear. You went through private correspondence? You used me. You signed voluntarily. You hid foreclosure notices in my room. You benefited too. I was postpartum. That word echoed sharply through the room. Postpartum. Not emotional, not unstable. Postpartum. Human. My mother started crying quietly beside the fireplace. Stan sat down heavily on the couch with both hands over his face. Outside, a car slowed slightly past Pax's house before continuing down Hawthorne Lane. Neighbors noticing. Witnesses. Exactly what my father wanted originally. Just not like this. Marcus cleared his throat carefully. Legally speaking, he said, Mrs. Carter retains authority regarding residency decisions connected to the property. My father laughed again, but this time it sounded broken. You'd throw your own parents out? The question hurt, because part of me still loved them. That was the unbearable truth underneath everything. I looked around the living room slowly. The framed family photographs, the polished piano, the staircase where my mother used to sit brushing my hair before school. Home existed here once. Real home. Then I looked at Ava sleeping peacefully against my shoulder. And suddenly the answer became simple. No, I said quietly. But I won't let you control me through this house anymore either. My father stared at me silently, waiting. So did everyone else. I took one slow breath. Then I said the sentence nobody in that room expected. You can stay here temporarily, I told them calmly, but the mortgage gets refinanced into your names within 90 days. Or I sell the property. Complete silence. My father looked genuinely shocked, not relieved, shocked, because cruelty had prepared him for war, not boundaries. And that confused him more than anger ever could. My father did not speak for almost a full minute after I gave him the 90-day deadline. He just stood there beside his recliner, staring at me like I had become someone unrecognizable. Maybe I had. Sometimes survival changes your face before anyone notices. Finally, he laughed quietly under his breath, not amused, disbelieving. You think you can manage this alone? The old strategy again, doubt disguised as concern. I adjusted Ava carefully against my shoulder before answering. I already have. Outside, the sky darkened slowly toward evening. Streetlights flickered on across Hawthorne Lane one by one, while silence settled heavily through the living room. Nobody knew where to look anymore, not Denise, not Nathan, not even my mother. Because once truth enters a family publicly, everyone must decide what role they played before the truth arrived. That part is harder than people admit. Officer Ruiz checked his watch discreetly near the front door. Marcus began organizing documents back into his portfolio with quiet professional movements. The confrontation was ending, but the damage would continue long afterward. My mother finally crossed the room slowly. For 1 second, I thought she might hug me. Instead, she reached carefully toward Ava's blanket. She's cold, she whispered. That almost broke me, because after everything, her first instinct still centered on the baby. Real love existed inside her, somewhere beneath all the fear and loyalty and silence. That was what made forgiveness complicated. I let her adjust the blanket. Nothing more. My father noticed. Of course he did. Small permissions mattered in that house, always had. You embarrass this family, he said quietly. Denise looked at him sharply. No, Frank, she answered before I could speak. You did. He turned toward her slowly. You don't understand the pressure. You used your daughter's identity. I protected this home. There it is again, Denise snapped softly. You keep saying home when you mean property. That sentence hung in the room like smoke, because it was true. Somewhere along the years, my father had stopped loving the people inside the house more than the house itself. And once that happens, everything becomes transactional eventually. Even family. Nathan stood suddenly from the couch. I knew something was wrong, he said quietly. Nobody interrupted him. He rubbed both hands over his face before continuing. I heard Dad talking to the bank months ago. His voice shook slightly. I just didn't think he'd actually put your name on everything. I looked at him carefully. You should have told me. I know. The honesty in that answer hurt more than excuses would have. Across the room, my mother sat slowly on the edge of the armchair nearest the fireplace. Her makeup had smudged beneath her eyes. She looked exhausted, old. For the first time in my life, I realized she had probably spent decades surviving my father's version of love the same way I had, by staying quiet long enough to keep peace alive another day. That realization did not erase what she allowed, but it changed the shape of my anger slightly. You could have warned me, I said softly. Tears filled her eyes immediately. I thought he'd fix it before you ever found out. Fix it, another family phrase. Problems never got acknowledged directly in our house. They got managed quietly until someone drowned beneath them. What if I never found out? I asked. My mother looked down at her hands. No answer came, because we all knew the answer already. I would have continued making payments on a house I thought belonged to someone else whilst being treated like a guest inside it. That was the real cruelty, not just the financial betrayal, the psychological one, the deliberate shrinking of my place inside my own life. Marcus closed his portfolio finally and stood. I'll follow up regarding refinancing options Monday morning, he said carefully. I nodded once. My father said nothing. Pride kept him rigid even now, but fear sat visibly beneath it. Real fear this time. Not fear of losing property, fear of losing authority, and maybe those had become the same thing too. Dana stepped closer beside me then. You ready? She asked quietly. I looked around the living room one last time. The grandfather clock, the staircase, the framed vacation photos, pretending we had always been normal. A strange calm settled over me suddenly. Not victory, definitely not happiness, just clarity. Because once someone finally shows you the full architecture of manipulation, you cannot unknow it afterward. I turned toward the front door slowly. Then my father spoke again. Elena, I stopped. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then he asked the one question I think truly mattered to him underneath everything else. You really would sell it? The house. Not are we okay? Not will you come back? The house. I looked at him for a long time before answering. If I have to. Something in his expression collapsed quietly then, not dramatically, just enough. Enough to understand. For the first time, he realized the leverage was gone, completely gone. I opened the front door. Cold air rushed inside immediately, carrying the smell of rain and distant chimney smoke. Behind me, my mother started crying again. Nathan murmured something too soft to hear. Denise sat silently beside the fireplace with both hands folded tightly together. And my father? He stayed standing alone in the center of the living room, surrounded by documents proving control and love were never the same thing. Outside, Ava stirred gently against my shoulder as I walked toward the driveway. The porch light flickered once overhead, just like the night they locked us out. But this time I held the keys. And by spring, the house on Hawthorne Lane would belong to people who finally understood that home is not the person holding power inside the walls. Home is the person who refuses to weaponize it.